This isn't intended to be exhaustive, but what I want to do is explore a little bit about the way that I was considered an indispensable function, a utility, an owned dog. Example to be used by the state of Pennsylvania, which is a form of organized crime. Again, it's not intended to be exhaustive, but it is to apprehend the current political circumstances that I find myself in Tacoma, Washington, after years in Seattle. The people in Seattle have not proven themselves towards me to be any better. There's a narrative that pertains to my whereabouts as a citizen in Section 8 who's disabled and senior. And then there's a subcultural narrative which goes over the top to the world's leaders and cultural money bags. But what's interesting about the subcultural text is that my peers, my closest peers, are instrumental in perpetuating it without ever openly admitting it. So they've cut a deal of sorts. Now, Steve Langer was very revealing. He said that he wasn't sorry for anything that he did, only that it had to be me. Oliver Stone was a little more shiftless in the manner that you would expect. He said that the letter that I wrote to Leslie was psychologically consistent with the way that I was being depicted. So if you asked Rusted Root, they wouldn't admit that their jealousy was the problem. They wouldn't admit that I was just being used. They would agree with Oliver Stone. Nobody suggests that I knew anything about the script of what John Lennon was doing or was said to have had done to him. But the author was never arrested, and her likeness appears on a '79 album cover of one of his friends. So there's clear evidence that the reason she wasn't arrested is because she was working with them on a Houdini. But the subcultural text is the idea that I could have saved John Lennon and that the screenplay belongs to the authors to benefit Seattle's groupies. And the union is squabbling over it, and they can't get enough of it because Louis Lapham says, "What became of your senses that you didn't understand what they were doing?" You could have saved John Lennon is their claim. So that subverts that I had nothing to do with it, knew nothing about it. So they knock their heads on the wall and torture me and subject me to all sorts of homicidal sadisms because they can't accept that there's a person who exists who could have saved John Lennon, as they put it. Well, I propose to explore some of the alternative forms of representation that was involved. My father had a book from 1949, right out of World War II, called America's Stake in Human Rights. So they attacked me because they believe that humans don't have rights. And they wanted to prove that nobody takes seriously. They were always saying nobody takes you seriously. Franklin Graham wrote to me and said, "The humanist is the greatest threat to democracy since communism." My father had a book called Humanizing the School. So obviously I'm categorically born to be hated by the Christian lunatics in the Graham Society. And they hold by using Christianity for hate and a lot of other things. It's a cultural phenomenon in Christianity that uses as its trump card the New Testament's book of Revelations to spoil the environment and so forth. So along comes something like this, and it's their duty to find some way to consider this either Satanism or at odds with humanism. And the way they do that is that Trump claims John Lennon for himself. And it may seem strange to have this Mad Hatter of the Christian right being a firebrand for sex, drugs, and rock and roll. But when it comes to Ringo Starr, the fact that people aren't very rational is an override switch. So there you have the kettle of fish, so to speak. Now, as a humanist, I think this is important to integrate into our schools. I'm not trying to undermine Greta by applauding her efforts to save the planet for the young and to protest the enormity being visited on the very good people of Gaza. I think it's absurd that people can't get along despite having different cultural premises based in religion. The wall of sound that goes out to squelch true enlightenment about Islam, for example, it's just crazy. That's why America's charms were almost appreciated around the world, because America's charms considered it a civil right to believe as you will, so long as you obeyed the laws and were considerate to each other, which are based on not doing harm to one another. Believe what you will, but don't do anything to disturb the safety and health and welfare of the other people living around you. But Bush blew it. He came from Hollywood's Nazism. The Axis never accepted defeat in World War II. They came groaning from Japan that they were the victims. JFK was done in and FDR was abandoned. My father was at Teachers College with Eisenhower. I don't think Franklin Graham would pick on me the way that he does. And Oliver North would pick on me the way that he does if they didn't see me as already beaten. The way the people of Gaza, there's a genocide, there's a Holocaust going on there. Those people were the way the Jews were. They were helpless and unarmed, women and children mostly. If I wasn't basically an unarmed, disabled, deaf senior, they wouldn't come beating me from behind and sending me smoking gun autographs and so on. So the question for me is really the degree of dignity that exists in the society I live in. We didn't recognize the idea that America's better nature was recognized and applauded around the world. Standing up for the rights of the poor, free speech, building a healthcare system, an open educational system, bringing social workers in to help the truly needy so that they didn't have to resort to having large numbers of children because of infant mortality. The study of society, the sustainable development movement in ecology. All of this was subverted by the war machine's oil fixation and the cold hatred that exists in the underworld character of the extreme right wing. It's a nuisance problem that has come to become a, making a major bid for cultural domination. And it's attacking us. It's amazing the degree to which, for example, medicine, which is supposed to help people, has been weaponized. They weaponized John Lennon's legacy. Trump is using John Lennon's legacy as a weapon to promote what you would think were the opposite of what Lennon believed in. But that's just mistaking his true nature. Lennon and McCartney were a Brothers Grimm story. They set out to conquer by misleading people, the system of miseducation. And that's why you have Roger Waters hurting something like my father on a school bus stop, humanizing the school. And they say they had to manufacture. Rusted Root and Franklin Graham decided they were on the same page because Ringo Starr said, you can't be a walrus. You ain't good like Lennon. And it was an override switch that took no cognizance of the fact that I knew nothing about any of that. They said I was sleeping around with too many girls. Those girls were seducing me. Poor Thorles is in the limelight anytime he goes out with the concubine. And so he can't bear the fact that a deaf poet was sleeping on the couch and the girl got lonely in the middle of the night.